When I was in the 11th grade, I had a recurring nightmare. The nightmare was that I would oversleep on the morning of the SATs and show up too late to take them. Therefore, I would not go to college, my life would be over, and I would never be happy again. It was a very vivid nightmare. That spring, I visited my dentist for a regular appointment, and he told me that I was beginning to wear away the enamel on the surfaces of my teeth. He asked if I ever woke up with a sore jaw. Turned out I had started grinding my teeth in my sleep. I told my parents about the oversleeping for the SATs nightmare, and they talked to me about managing my stress. I'm sure they said lots of things that any concerned and loving parent would say, but this is what stands out in my memory. My mom tried to reassure me I wouldn't oversleep for the SATs. I protested, but it could happen. Yeah, said my mom, it could happen, but not to you. You just wouldn't let it. I was strangely comforted by these simple words, and at that moment, in 11th grade, I divided the world into two camps, people who could oversleep for the SATs and people who could not, and I put myself in that second camp. So it wouldn't happen to me because I wouldn't let it. I stopped grinding my teeth. I stopped having nightmares. The SATs came. I was eventually accepted to college. Off I went. I sailed through my freshman year. I experienced success. I made new friends. Clearly, my mom had been right. In my sophomore year of college, I registered for a course called Introduction to Statistics to satisfy a graduation requirement. I thought statistics would be boring, so I elected to take it pass-fail, so I wouldn't have to work as hard. I still considered myself a conscientious student. A big part of my identity was that I went to class every day, I took notes, but I didn't always finish my stats problem sets. Well, it turns out I was completely wrong. Statistics is not remotely boring, but it was about halfway through the semester before I realized that, and I had missed a lot by not doing all the problem sets. It became increasingly difficult for me to follow the material in class. Let's fast forward to the end of the semester. It's the last week of school. I am writing a huge paper for a course in my intended major, English literature. The topic is women writers, 1790 to 1830, and the professor is someone I really admire. Although I began the paper weeks ago and have scribbled pages and pages of notes, this paper has taken on a life of its own. I am living and breathing this paper. I am ordering books from other libraries and having them delivered to my campus library. Before I know it, the deadline is upon me. This paper is due tomorrow at 5 p.m. I promise myself I will finish the paper by dinner today. Okay, by 10 o'clock, by midnight. This paper will be done by 2 a.m. Okay, it will be done by the time the sun comes up. Okay, by lunch. When I finish the paper at 4:45, I print it out, and I walk onto campus to deliver it to my professor's office. I'm elated. It's the best paper I have ever written. I know this, and I feel a giddy excitement as I walk onto campus to deliver it. It's only on the long walk back to my off-campus dorm that I realized two things. A, I am incredibly tired. And B, my statistics exam is at 8 a.m. So I tell myself that I'm going to go to sleep for a few hours and then I'm going to get up super early and study like mad for this exam. So I set my alarm for 2 o'clock in the morning, thinking this will give me a solid 5.5, 6 hours of studying. I collapse on my bed and I fall asleep. Liz, hey Liz, it's my roommate. Don't you have an exam this morning? Oh my God, what time is it? It's 10:15. My exam doesn't actually end until 11. So in my panic-stricken state, I decide that I will run onto campus and take the rest of this exam. I ignore my roommate's pleas for common sense. I grab my stats textbook, my stacks of notes. I slip on my flip-flops, and I go barreling out of my dorm room. People give me strange looks on campus as I'm sprinting by them, slipping in the wet grass in my flip-flops. My hair is flying in front of my face. I'm wearing the pajamas I slept in. The stats book is clutched to my chest. The papers are ruffling in the wind. It is a long, gradual hill from where I live to where the exam is being given on the 4th floor. Gasping for air, I run up the 4 flights and down the hall to the main lecture room. My whole body smacks against the double doors as they burst open, and 100 silent, startled faces turn to look at me. And in that moment, I flash back to high school, to my recurring nightmare about the SATs, to what my mom had said, and I realized that for all the people in that room taking that exam, I am the thing they define themselves against. I am the person, their example of what they will never do, oversleep for a big important exam. I realized with crushing clarity, I am exactly the kind of person who would oversleep for an exam. My professor, a kindly Swedish man, approaches me. He doesn't scold me or ask me any questions at all. Instead, he gently suggests that I may want to go to the restroom to pull myself together. I tiptoe out of the exam room. I walk down the hall to the bathroom. But instead of taking his advice, splashing some water on my face, a few deep breaths, I crouch in a bathroom stall, frantically trying to study my notes, not grasping that with only 35 minutes remaining in a 3-hour exam period, it is perhaps too late to cram for this exam. I finally return to the exam room. My professor hands me the exam with a whispered suggestion to just focus on sections 1 and 4. He pats my hand as if to say, "You poor, poor girl." The rest of the day is a complete blur in my memory. I did try to take a little bit of that exam, and I must have written a few stray answers here and there before my time ran out. What I mainly remember is waking up again much later in the day and thinking for a moment I had dreamed the whole thing and having a really sore jaw. So in less than 24 hours, I had experienced what at that time were the highest and lowest points of my academic career: a brilliant paper in English and a disastrous performance in statistics. Since you're probably curious, I will tell you, I did get an A on that English paper and an F on that exam, both of which I had earned. With the stats exam, my old nightmare had come true more vividly than I had ever imagined it. But to my great surprise, the world did not end. I failed a huge final exam. I embarrassed myself in front of 100 classmates. The next day, shockingly enough, the sun came up. I came to realize that that one stats exam did not make me a bad student any more than that one English paper made me a good one. Turns out, you don't prove your worth academically on any one test or paper, just as you don't measure a friendship by one grand gesture or one fight. Friendship is created in the daily tasks, sitting together at lunch, cracking up about nothing. It's about the patterns you establish and who you show yourself to be over time, not a single high or low point. In high school, I had organized my thinking around this idea of two types of people in the world, one that would oversleep and one that would not. But now I believe that anyone at any time could be in either camp if the conditions are right. And I find that idea liberating because who I am doesn't hinge on any one act or moment. Who I am and who you are is a product of the daily work we do, the incremental changes we make, the ways we expand over time. And I've taken more risks inside the classroom and out because I feel less defined by the outcome of any specific one. You can fail a huge statistics exam and still graduate from college because a single failure will never define you. As a teacher now, so many years later, I recall with great appreciation how kind my professor was to me in that moment. I still got the F on the exam, as I deserved, but he didn't make me feel like I was a failure. He was gentle, perhaps because he understood that one event does not tell us everything we need to know about a person. Ironically, it seems I did manage to learn a little bit about statistics after all. I had created for myself the illusion of a binary world, but I learned that everyone lives somewhere on a statistical continuum, that you can do things to increase or decrease the odds of getting to an exam on time, but people don't exist in absolute terms. Statistically speaking, on any given day, any of us could be anywhere. One of the things I've continued to think about in the many years since that exam is in fact a statistical concept, the normal distribution. So with apologies to Ms. Spencer and Mr. Cole in case I explained this incorrectly, the normal distribution is what we sometimes call the bell curve. I remember learning about this with the classic illustration of flips of a coin. So we're not surprised when we get 3 heads in a row, but 30 heads in a row surprises us. Why? It's because we forget that each flip of the coin is independent. If we did more and more and more and more and more flips as we approach infinity, we find that it is even, half heads, half tails. That's the normal distribution. We're only surprised when we get all heads or all tails because we forget how small our sample is compared to infinity. The normal distribution is also something I think about metaphorically. When I do something that's really out of character or embarrassing, I remind myself that it's, well, normal. Perhaps part of the inevitable distribution pattern of my human life. For me, failing that exam seemed like the most embarrassing and public failure I could imagine. But from that experience, I learned to let go of some of my worry. Without that exam, I might never have learned that I want to measure myself by the patterns of my behavior over time, much more so than by the individual lows or the individual highs. And because I'm less afraid of the lows, I think I've achieved more highs. I wish the same for each of you. So remember, messing up is normal. Unlike flips of a coin, though, you can affect your chances. And I suggest always setting 2 alarm clocks. Thank you.